Well, welcome. This is Facebook Live and Ben Shapiro Show, and joining me is Representative Jim Jordan from Ohio, a terrific congressperson and a solid fighter for the conservative cause. He's joining me now to discuss the newly released text messages between former members of Robert Mueller's investigative team, Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. This time, apparently, there's a new controversy rising. So, Representative Jordan, thanks so much for joining us.
Good to be with you, Ben. And we
that are
not just Strzok, who ran the Clinton investigation. Says we want to release it. Start. Have the House Intelligence Committee meet. Have a vote. A majority votes to release it. 5 days. It goes to the White House. I would expect the president to do one of two things. I would expect him within 5 seconds to say, release it, give it the thumbs up. Or if he doesn't say that, just to let it ride out those 5 days, and then it can be public. But one thing is critical, Ben. When this goes public, you need the supporting footnotes and references to the material so that it doesn't just look like a partisan document, but a document that is highlighting where this information come from that's in this memo that members of Congress got to read. But I'll tell you, every single member that's read it has walked out of there and said, journalists like you need to see it. More importantly, the American people need to see it, because placed at the highest levels of the FBI should not happen in this country.
What exactly is the holdup? I mean, the Republicans obviously control the Intelligence Committee, so why don't they just vote for it? I mean, are there specific members who aren't pushing for it?
I think no, most are, and I think Chairman Nunes wants to do it. I mean, this was a process of kind of building. First, they were doing their investigation. They produced the memo. We called on a couple of weeks ago, Congressman Meadows and I, to let members of Congress see the memo. That has happened. We've seen it. Every single member who's seen it says make it public. So I think that's where it's going to go. I think they're struggling with how to reference and footnote and cite the classified material and make sure that's done in a way that's consistent with classification standards, consistent with not doing any harm to our intelligence community. But this is so important. You got to get it public. And I wish it would have happened yesterday, but now I'm for as soon as it possibly can.
Well, this brings me to the second question that I have about this, and I mentioned it on my show a couple of days ago. Yeah, obviously, the Trump administration has the capacity to declassify whatever they want, and if what we're really talking about here is the FISA application that presumably includes a Fusion GPS reference, then why doesn't the administration just declassify whatever? I mean, why don't they go through and figure out what has to maintain classification? I mean, it should be up to, I mean, if Trump wants to exonerate himself, this seems like a pretty easy way to do it.
Yeah. And you're right, he could, but I think part of it is, you know how the left is. If the president pushes for something, declassifies something, the left's going to continue to say, oh, there he goes, obstruction, interfering with Mueller, and all that baloney that we've heard now for several months. So my guess is he and his lawyers are a little reluctant to go that route. They would prefer, I think, well, I don't know if they would, but this is probably a route where the president doesn't have to actively do it. He can do it in a secondary way once we've released the memo with, again, the reference and cited material.
Okay, so Representative Jordan, I would be remiss today if I didn't ask you a little bit about the government shutdown. Obviously, the Democrats spend 3 days being idiots and shut down the government to no end. They surrender, gaining nothing in the process except demonstrating that they have no leverage. So now, leading up to February 8th, when we're going to have another one of these continuing resolutions that has to come up, the Democrats they've lost whatever leverage they can try here. But we're also leading up to a March 6th deadline on DACA when the applications close, or when DACA itself closes. So what exactly do you expect from the House and the Senate? Because one of my concerns, obviously, is that there is some fractiousness within the Republican caucus. There's some doves like Lindsey Graham in the Senate. There are obviously conservatives in the House like you. What do you expect to come out of this? Because is this going to result in a softer immigration policy, or is this going to result in something that's actually defensible on conservative grounds?
No, great question. You've cut right to the chase, as you typically do. So, yeah, we've got to pass a strong bill out of the House. I would prefer what's been called the Goodlatte legislation. Goodlatte, Raul Labrador, and Chairman McCall have put together legislation which has the focus in the right place. And again, I always start from the premise: the American people just assume, and it's a good assumption, that Congress is going to do the wrong thing on immigration. But we had an election in 2016 where it was clear: border security wall, in-chain migration, stop this crazy sanctuary city policy, excuse me, deal with the visa lottery issue, all the good stuff that we have to do. That has to be the focus. And then the final point is, and then we'll address the DACA issue as well. What Durbin Graham and others want to do in the Senate Excuse me. I've had a cold here,
Oh,
Mr.
no worries.
Shapiro. So they want to flip it around. They want to flip it around. They want to go DACA first, a little window dressing around border security, and oh, we promise, we'll finally get to what the American people wanted us to do in the 2016 election and why they put us in power. That is not going to fly. So let's pass the strong bill in the House. That gives us a better position as we deal with the Senate. And the key to this is, of course, President Trump. I'm convinced he's strong on this issue. He was elected on this issue, and he's going to do it the way we want. But that's how it's going to hopefully play out, where that strong bill will be the final product, the one we can pass in the House.
And President Trump obviously is the key component here, because during the immigration meeting that was had at the White House, it seemed like he misspoke at the very least when he talked about what he would sign with regard to Dianne Feinstein, and then Representative McCarthy stepped in and sort of set him straight, and then he was on the straight and narrow and has been since with regard to immigration. The big question is going to be, if the House passes something and the Senate passes something different, it goes to conference committee, something weak comes out, is Trump actually going to push? Is he actually going to veto something? Is that veto threat real, or is the House going to have to act as the shield here? And will the House act as the shield? Will the House prevent something from landing on the president's desk?
I mean, Ben, remember, Paul Ryan is Speaker because one of the conditions he told the Freedom Caucus in a long meeting where the 40 of us sat down with him a couple years ago is there would be no immigration legislation that came to the floor of the House that unless it had the support of a majority of the House Republican Conference. And a majority of the House Republican Conference views this issue like you and I do. So that's the good thing. So I think the House will be strong, and I believe the president will be strong. Remember, this was the issue that launched his campaign and took him in a 17-person primary to the top. So I think so.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah, I think we'll be
well, great.
good.
So we'll see how all of that shakes out. And I know that you have a busy day, Representative Jordan. Thanks so much for taking the time. We'll have you back on and do this again when we have some more updates in all of these areas. But you're a friend, and I appreciate you being on.
I won't have a cold the next time.
No worries. Feel better.